All right. It's time we start coming back into the room and get ready for the last session of the morning. And Cliff just reminded me that I cannot bring up the Lutherans sitting in the back of the room anymore. This is it's probably discrimination, but maybe the Catholics should move up this time. As I was sitting in the back of the room, I was not able to read what was on the screen very well. So if you can't read and you want to see the screens better, there's still room up in the front. So this last session that we're going to have for this morning session, we have Karen Goff with the North Dakota Department of Water Resources. She will give an update on the state's dam safety requirements. Karen Goff is the Dam Safety Program Manager at the North Dakota Department of Water Resources. She is a registered professional engineer and has over 20 years of experience with the state dam safety program. Karen?
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, so we're gonna go in a completely different direction from the last couple of presentations and talk about dams and dam safety. So switch the gears in your brain and we'll get started. All right, so if you're not familiar, our dam safety program is located within the regulatory division at the DWR. So as mentioned, I'm the program manager, and then there's two engineers that work with me, Nick Bendixson and Damon Graybo, and then Aaron Carranza is our division director. So we're going to start out with just a short overview of dam safety, kind of an initiation for those that aren't familiar, and then get into some program updates, things that are going on at DWR. People are generally surprised to learn that we have over 7,300 dams in North Dakota that we know of that are in our database of dams that we maintain at DWR. And those are everything from Garrison Dam and your other large federal dams down to small low-head dams, your small private stock dams, and everything in between. Of those, we currently have 109 that are classified as what we call high hazard or medium hazard, meaning that there's people or significant infrastructure, something like that downstream. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Of those 109, the average age of those is over 60 years old. And that's important because, like anything else, as things age, things start to wear out, things start to go wrong, they start to need a little more TLC, more repairs, that sort of thing. And of those, 65% of those are locally owned by the water resource districts or local communities. So why do we care about dam safety? Why is it something we talk about or concern ourselves with? Well, because throughout history, both in the United States and around the world, there have been a lot of dam failures. And we don't have time to get into details today, but you can go out on the internet or on YouTube, and there's tons of case studies, really fascinating stories that you can look into if that's something that interests you. These are just a handful of examples of some well-known ones, just to give you a little bit of flavor of some of the damages and loss of life that have occurred from some of these over the years. And then I get asked from time to time if we've ever had any failures in North Dakota. And the answer to that is yes, we have. Fortunately, we haven't had any what we'll call major failures with loss of life or significant or major damages. Um, I guess we've been lucky in that they've been, smaller dams or in more rural areas, but we have had some failures for sure. And these are some other examples of incidents that have happened that didn't lead all the way to failure, but could have. And there have been others as well, just during my time in dam safety. I'm sure some of you can think of examples as well. Um, so the point of all this, I guess, is that there's a reason why we talk about dams and dam safety, and it is a something to think about here in North Dakota. So dams fail for a lot of reasons, and usually it's a lot of interrelated things that kind of come together, sort of a perfect storm sort of situation. But there's two big ones that kind of rise to the top. Excuse me, rise to the top and cause a lot of failures. And I've got a couple of just a little video clips, if I can get them to work here. And the first one is overtopping. Let's see if this works.
Dams are designed to store runoff resulting from heavy rain. When storage has reached a specific limit, spillways are designed to pass the excess floodwaters, initially through a primary spillway. Many dams are equipped with an emergency spillway to help pass large flood inflows which exceed the capacity of the primary spillway. In an extreme flood, flows can exceed the combined spillway capacity, spill over the top of the dam, and create a very dangerous situation. Overtopping flood flows can rapidly erode down into an earthen embankment dam, leading to an uncontrolled release of the stored waters and causing catastrophic flooding downstream.
Okay, and the next one talks about
Dams are
piping.
designed to store runoff.
No. Okay, piping or internal erosion from seepage. Okay.
Most all dams experience seepage to one degree or another. While the dam experiencing seepage may appear in sound condition, there may be damage occurring to the internal structure of the dam. If seepage flow rates appear to be increasing and the flow is not clear and is carrying material, internal erosion or piping is likely occurring. Piping is an erosion process that occurs inside the dam whenever the seepage flow starts eroding embankment materials out of and away from the dam. This starts at the downstream slope or toe and moves rapidly upstream to the impoundment. This process will tend to accelerate as the expanding larger opening or pipe allows for increased seepage flows. If left unattended, the seepage flow and progressive internal erosion will soon get out of control. When the internal pipe or void becomes large enough, the embankment structure above it will collapse. This will result in a failure of the dam's embankment and a potentially catastrophic release of the stored water, which may cause serious property damage and loss of life.
Okay. Um, so when we talk about dam risk, there's three things that go into that. The hazard, which would be your flood or your big rainfall event, and then the performance of the dam and the consequences, what's downstream. So if we talk about reducing dam risk, how do we reduce that? The hazard, there's not much we can really do about that. If it's going to rain, it's going to rain. But the performance, we have a lot of control over that. Things like how making sure the dam is properly designed and constructed, inspections, making sure we have proper maintenance and repair of our dam. Those are huge. And then consequences. That's where your emergency action planning comes in, trying to reduce the impacts downstream if there is an issue at your dam. So I put this slide in here. To me, this kind of helps illustrate the big picture. We talk about a lot of different things in dam safety, and this kind of helps explain how all those pieces kind of fit together. What it really all boils down to is it all comes down to trying to reduce risk associated with dams. And so I guess that's just a little introduction. Now we're going to get started kind of talking about some of our updates, things that we have going on at DWR. And there's three um, major updates, I guess, to talk about. Our new dam safety standards, new hazard classification definitions and guidelines, and then our statewide probable maximum precipitation study. Those are all things that we've completed within the last several years. Some of you may be familiar with them already, some maybe aren't, but those are pretty major updates. So we'll talk through those, and then we'll briefly go over some of the current activities that we have going on as well. So our new dam safety standards, a little background to start with. So I'm sure you're all familiar that a construction permit's required to construct or modify a dam in North Dakota. And going back to 1985, the state engineer had published the North Dakota Dam Design Handbook, and that was the source of our design standards for many, many years if you wanted to get a construction permit in North Dakota. But it had never been updated, and so a lot of the content was starting to get out of date. So basically, it was due for an update. We began that process in 2017. We hired an engineering consultant to help us with that process. And our new standards became effective January 1st of 2024. And they completely supersede that old 1985 handbook. So our goal was to align our DWR policy with current best practices in dam design. And we wanted to outline our minimum technical requirements, design requirements for getting a construction permit, and also outline our application requirements for a construction permit. And so the new standards apply to all water retention structures that require a construction permit, be it a dam, pond, lagoon, and both new construction and modification of existing dams. So for existing dams, we also have something called the Legacy Dams Policy that was also effective January 1st of 2024. And this policy basically says that if you have an existing dam, you don't have to do anything due to the new standards until such time that you decide to do some sort of modification at your dam that needs a construction permit. And so it's through that construction permit process that the new standards come into play. And if you have a dam that for some reason it's just not feasible to meet the new standards, there are some avenues outlined in the standards that talk about some different options where it is possible to deviate from the standards, and those are discussed in the standards. So just a few highlights from the new standards. As mentioned, they go over all of our application requirements for obtaining a construction permit. Basically, everything you need to know is outlined in there. Everything for a complete application is discussed in pretty extensive detail. It talks about submitting construction permit applications when the design is near 95% complete. We don't want things too early when the design is still changing. Also not when it's 100% locked in case something does need to change through the review process. And then it also talks about pre-application consultation. Uh, we want you to call us early and often, talk to us about your project, ask us questions. We want to work with you to make sure when you do submit your application, we have everything in order. We're all on the same page. Makes your life easier, makes our life easier, so we can get everything approved as easy as possible. And then the technical requirements, it doesn't tell you everything you need to know to design a dam, not by a long shot, but it's our minimum requirements to get a construction permit. And there's sections in there for different components of dams, your spillway, your embankment, all those things are outlined in the standards. There's also a section that talks about construction completion submittals. And those are the things that we all kind of like to forget about after the permit is issued and after the dam is built. There are some things that are outlined in admin code, North Dakota Administrative Code, like as-built plans and just notifying DWR that the project is complete, and operation and maintenance manual for high and medium hazard dams. Those are required in admin code and talked about in more detail in the standards. And then emergency action plan requirements. An EAP is required for high and medium hazard dams by North Dakota Century Code. And there's a section in the new standards that talks all about what's required for that, what should be included. One of the big components is your inundation map, what's required for that. And there have been some updates to those requirements from previous guidance from before the new standards. So if you go to update your EAP, do take a look at those new requirements. So the next topic we'll look at is hazard classification. We mentioned that briefly earlier, but it's basically just a broad bucket that we group dams into based on what's downstream. It's a look at what's going to be impacted if the dam were to fail. It has nothing to do with the condition of the dam or how likely it is to fail. Just strictly, if the dam failed, what would be impacted? And so in North Dakota, we have 3 categories: low hazard, medium hazard, or high hazard. You'll also hear the term sometimes significant hazard, and that is interchangeable and synonymous with medium hazard. And those are defined in administrative code. And so if there's probable loss of life, that's a high hazard dam. Medium hazard are those where there's no probable loss of life, but there could be homes downstream that could be damaged, or other significant infrastructure like main highways, railroads, that sort of thing. Low hazard dams are typically in more rural areas, but there could still be more minor roads or unoccupied buildings, outbuildings, that sort of thing. So we're talking about updates. So what changed? Well, the definitions that I just showed you are what we'll call our new definitions that were effective January 1st of 2023. Prior to that, we did have very similar definitions, but the language was slightly different. And the big change was how loss of life is treated. Pre-2023, there could be some loss of life associated with a medium hazard dam. And recall now, any loss of life is a high hazard dam. The old definitions were not in line with the industry standard or federal agency or the majority of other states for that matter. So we revised those definitions to bring us in line with the state of the practice. Also, we now have a section in the new standards that gives written guidance for applying those hazard classification definitions. It tells how do we look at loss of life for the purposes of the hazard classification. How do we look at roads? How do we look at homes? All that's spelled out. Before the standards, we didn't have written definition or written guidance that talked about that. So, over the years, different people doing the classifications over a long period of time, you can imagine we had some inconsistencies creep in to our classifications. So we wanted this to be, technically sound, but also consistent, transparent, and repeatable. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is our probable maximum precipitation study. So first, a definition. Probable maximum precipitation, or PMP, in a nutshell, is the theoretical greatest depth of precipitation that you can get at a given location at a given time of year. And that is used in dam design, specifically for high hazard dams, because you want those to be able to handle anything that Mother Nature can throw at them. Formerly, those values were found in a series of reports that were developed by the federal agency NOAA in the 70s and 80s. The federal government wasn't updating those values, so a number of states, North Dakota included, took it upon themselves to do their own statewide studies to update their values. And our study was completed in 2021. A lot of benefits to this study. Obviously, better data due to the longer period of record and improved methods over what they had in the 70s and 80s. And new features. One of the big ones is it includes cool season PMP and snow melt, basically rain on snow events, because we all know that spring runoff is a big deal in North Dakota. We have a lot of dam issues due to spring runoff. It also includes temporal and spatial distributions of rainfall, or how rainfall is distributed in time and space over your watershed. And that's all rolled up in a GIS tool. And the figure shown there is from the final study report. And I included that just because it shows some actual rainfall events, recorded rainfall events. And I was going to point out the ones in North Dakota. I don't know if I can read them from here. Yeah, I don't know if you can read them from where you're sitting, but yeah, they're kind of just fascinating. Turtle River, North Dakota, 2020 inches of rain. Glen Olin, North Dakota, 1966, 12.87 inches. Leonard, North Dakota, 1975, 20.86 inches of rain. I just think that's fascinating. Fun food for thought. Imagine if that happened over your dam or your watershed. All right, and then if you're wondering how the new values compared to the old HMR values or the old reports, it depends on where you're located, and it depends on exactly what storm you're looking at. But this figure kind of shows just a kind of the broad trends that we were seeing. And so in general, we can say that in the West, there were some areas with some pretty big decreases from the old values. Those are kind of the orange, the darker orange areas. the darkest orange, some of those were up to 15 to 19% decrease. And then the moving east, kind of the green and yellows, those were pretty close to the original values, kind of plus or minus 5% range. And then there were some areas of increase as you move further east, some small areas. Those are the blues. I guess note that the dark blues are the biggest increase. Those dark blue areas you're seeing at the far east of the study boundary, those are off in Minnesota. So we don't have to worry about those, I guess. Okay, and so the last big topic we'll talk about are some of our current things that we have going on. In the coming soon category, we talked a lot about our new dam safety standards. Those were effective, as mentioned, at the beginning of 2024. So we've been using those for a couple of years now. And as we've been using those, we have found a few things that aren't perfect, things that need to be clarified or that can be improved upon. So we are working on some updates. So do watch for that. And then you've probably all heard that there are some administrative code updates that'll be coming out in April. I guess as far as our construction permit process, that'll just further define kind of the steps in that process and attach some time frames to that. And in conjunction with that update, we are working on an update to our construction permit application form, the application itself. So do be on the lookout for that as well. Some other things. So we talked about our PMP study. Right now, if you want to access that data, you'd go to our website, download a GIS tool, runs in ArcGIS, and that works perfectly fine. But the contractor that did that study, Applied Weather, they are working on developing a web portal that will greatly enhance the ease of access to that data. I don't have an exact go live date of that yet, but that should be coming pretty soon as well. That could probably have been in the coming soon column. Hazard classifications, with the new definitions and the new guidance for applying those, we've been working on reviewing all of our dams in the state that are 20 feet high or greater, just to make sure they're consistent with those new definitions and the new guidance. So right now we're about just over 60% through that process. So that's ongoing until we're done with that. The dam inventory project, that's kind of a fun, different little thing. That's something we're doing in conjunction with the USGS. The USGS is actually doing the work on that. They're using machine learning in conjunction with our statewide LiDAR data and satellite imagery to find and catalog all the dams and impoundments in North Dakota. Idea being that we can use that to cross-reference and improve that database of 7,300 dams that I showed you in the beginning. And then lastly, with our new design standards and our new PMP data, we are having a consultant look at a handful of our dams to see how they fit into that. Do they meet our spillway capacity requirements? Do they not? Right now we're looking at 6 dams. We might add a few more to that to see how they fall with that. And lastly, just a few resources. Our dam safety page on our DWR website. That's where you can find our dam safety standards, the PMP study, any updates, the new PMP web portal, our new application form, all that'll be posted there when it's available. And the other thing I wanted to point out to you is the Association of State Dam Safety Officials has a really great page just for dam owners. They have a lot of great resources there. One of the things is they have a whole series of videos. They call it the Dam Owner Academy. That are just little short videos on all kinds of topics, from hiring an engineer to emergency action planning. And those are linked on our website, and they're on YouTube. If you have some time on a cold, snowy day this winter, those are worth checking out. So that is all I have. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them, but yes. We don't have an operation certificate in North Dakota. Right. Yeah, we don't have an operation certificate. The state does the inspections. So yeah, right. Our high hazard dams are currently scheduled every 3 years. Yes. Yep.
Karen, you said earlier in the program that some dams are reclassified based on the new standards. Can a dam be reclassified from a high hazard or from a medium hazard down to a low hazard based on what's happening downstream?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they can go both ways. Yep.
Could they also go up in standard?
Yes. Yes, in theory they could. Any combination is possible.
Is there a process that the Water Resource Board would have to go through to try to move a dam either up or down?
Yeah. If a dam does change in classification, we'll notify the owner. If we're still working through that process, but we'll notify the owner, and like I say, through the legacy policy, the owner wouldn't have to do anything right away until, someday if they go to do some sort of modification, need a construction permit, that's when that would come into play. They can also, if somebody disagreed with us, they could have their own engineer or whatever tell us we're wrong and show us we're wrong. We're open to that too. So yeah, but we're working through that process. So yeah.
Any other questions for Karen?
Okay.
If not,
Thank you.
okay, before we move back upstairs, I've got just a few things, announcements to make. Some The opening luncheon is going to be upstairs in the Patterson-Lamborn room at 11:30. A buffet line will form and go through the Grand Pacific room as last year, and then we will move back to eat back in the Patterson and Lamborn room. You'll need a lunch ticket, so if you haven't got one, go through the registration room again and purchase a lunch ticket. For the board, for the managers, the forms are up here. If you need to be have credit for attending the manager's seminars, those forms are here. Fill them out and then bring them up to the registration desk up at upstairs. And don't forget, if you have an opportunity, fill out those surveys that are in the center of the convention booklet. I think for me, the main thing that we would like to get feedback on is what kind of presentations you want to hear in the future, and if you've had opportunity to hear speakers in the last couple of years or in the last couple of months that you think would be appropriate for this group to approach, then give us the names or the organizations that those speakers would be from, so we can try to schedule some very appropriate people into our program. So with that, we will move up to the Lamborn rooms and we will be looking for the noon lunch. So thank you.